Welcome to a brand new episode of the Marketing Business Wealth Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Witnish. Today, I'm going to air out some frustrations around some events that have happened in the last 3 hours, and you're going to be my therapist that just listens while I have this conversation, and I will lay the foundations and set the scene. So for several weeks now, I've tried to do a very particular episode on a very particular subject, which is the big three: being in business, being in a long-term intimate relationship like marriage, and also being a parent, and how to get those three worlds to coexist. And I feel like in the last 6 months, it's the first time I've made healthy progress in all three areas at the same time, and not just one or two of them. And I would have hit record and started doing the episode at least 10, maybe even more times this afternoon. I blocked out the whole afternoon to get it right. And I would throw myself. I get 6-7 minutes in and lose track and start over to go again because I wasn't happy with what I was saying and the rhythm and so forth. And that cycle just kept happening to the point where I want to just go hit a punching bag and bang my head against the wall. But the lesson that I'm taking from this, because everything you can put meaning to it, is that there were these intentions that I set at the start of the year, and one of them was to show up and do an episode of this podcast every week. And right now it's one of those challenging moments where you've set the time and space. I'm getting to the pointy end. Bailey's going to be home in the next few minutes, and I've wasted all that time and haven't got the outcome, and it's important to me for my consistency and rhythm. And I said, unless there's extreme circumstances like when Henry passed away in the early Jan, that I was going to show up and do it. And that's been the foundation to some incredible transformations in my body, in my health, and all areas of my life in recent times. And I think you can pick an area of your life where you're really consistent and you've got a habit and you just show up regardless of how you feel and get it done. And so then it started to pull against my values, like, I'm not going to get this episode done. I'm going to miss a podcast episode. And so what I've done is I've turned the camera off. If you're a YouTube viewer, you won't be seeing the video version of this week because it's just audio. Because I was throwing myself off seeing my face on the video recorder, and I started getting in. What was happening is 7 minutes in, like, I get an itchy nose and have to stop and scratch it. And I know you can edit and cut things, but it would throw the rhythm of the conversation. So what I'm choosing to take away right now is, even when it's difficult, even when it's tough, if you can still get out there and do the rep, you're going to get success when you look to the horizon. So I think about all those times where the weather's been average, or I've had a niggle, but I've still gone out and run, and I look at the impact that's had on my fitness, on my physical body. And because I did it even when I didn't want to, those reps have compounded into a pretty awesome result. And I've shared a few of those transformations on stories on social media, on Instagram Reels and so forth. And one of them was what my body looked like when I used to drink alcohol. So 18 months plus sober now. And I'd eat a lot of crap when I would drink and have all those calories as well. Get those cravings for the savory carbs is what I used to go for. And the transformation that what my body looks like now, I think it's from my peak 16 kilos lighter, probably on par with how my body looked when I was 19, 21, which is amazing. I'm turning 37 this year. And that was just having a long-term view, not going to extremes for once, so not doing anything ridiculous in terms of nutrition, but just getting out there and running multiple times a week. And then by taking away that substance that was my bottleneck, the drinking, and would lead to bad eating choices, feeling crap the next day, and reduced productivity, what that's done to my body. So I know that any area now that I pursue, that's the perfect metaphor. So same with business, when there's challenges on the table, and that happens a lot, especially I found when you're expanding a company, often when you make decisions and you invest in resources, sometimes you take a couple of steps back at the same time because you're getting clear on your market, clearing on your offerings. And sometimes when that happens, you will shed some of the things that aren't aligned with that in the process. And so it feels like you go backwards a couple of steps, plus you've put these resources in place. You might have hired more people, spent more money, built systems. So if in this temporary moment, say your revenue, your continuity revenue drops, you've increased your expenses, but every time it shapes the better business that you're building for the future. So in those moments, if you look at the horizon and go, okay, yes, there might be a little bit of perceived pressure or stress in this moment, but if I look at the horizon, this is laying the foundation for exactly the type of business that we want to build, and it aligns with the vision. And so this podcast episode is the polar opposite to the conversation I really wanted to have about the big three, but it's ended up being a lesson about the horizon and getting a rep in when I wanted to quit, headbutt, punch a punching bag, leave, and just not do it. But I guess if you're listening to this, I found a way. I managed to hit record and get through it. So to transition this into some value, you just go, what's the one area right now, today, this week, that I set an intention where I was going to do the reps or a particular activity, whether it was in the business, in your health, fitness, in your marriage, with your children, but it's feeling uncomfortable and you really don't want to do it. And just think about, hey, if you can get yourself to take that action and do that thing, especially when you don't want to, what does that look like on the horizon when you show up and do it at that consistent level all year long? How much better is your body? How much better is your business? How much better is your marriage? How much better is your relationship with your children? How much better is your podcast? To put it in very specific terms. Because I know that this podcast, and thank you to Chase, if you're listening in, mate, confirmed listener, Thomas Gilmore and Yuri, 3 people that confirmed they've listened to more than one episode. So I know there's a couple of people listening. And I can also share, if you are this far into the episode, like with the podcast, the first couple of episodes, you're showing up and you got the L plates on like I still do right now. And the goal here is to do the reps, to get better, to have better conversations so people are retained, they do tune in, they do listen. So with time, the audience grows, which means we can attract better people to come on and have conversations, or I can deliver better and add more value to the audience. And so I get to do this rep right now and completely on the fly. So obviously the notes that I had for the other conversation, and I'm just riffing. But I know just by doing this now and speaking into this microphone, I'm going to feel really good about myself for getting it done when it felt impossible. And I know if I keep doing that on the weeks where I don't want to record or things aren't going to plan, I'm going to have this build up catalog, this goodwill that's going to have a podcast that if I keep doing it for 3, 4, 5 years, it's going to get more traction. And I can see that with the earlier episodes where there are only a few downloads. Now each week we're getting more and more. So each episode gets more and more reach. So clearly a few more people are tuning in. And that's what comes with reps. You slowly get a little bit better. You slowly start to lose a little bit of body fat. You slowly start to put on a little bit of muscle. You slowly start to get more leads. You slowly start to increase revenue or profit. You slowly start to increase intimacy and connection with your partner. You slowly get to have more present time with your child. But each time, because you show up, you get a little bit better at that skill because you put more hours in. It's part of the whole 10,000 hours philosophy. So each time you do it, the output, the quality of that increases. So you get a better result from the performance you put in. But that consistency is also what builds up the stamina, and is also what builds up the compounding result. So the takeaway is I was extremely frustrated, and you've been my counselor or my therapist because I've edited out into this microphone. And I've got to the end of a very short episode, which was supposed to be a 30-minute conversation thereabouts about the big three. But we've still got an episode done this week. And I want to thank you if you got this far for listening to me. And I hopefully can return the favor if you want to pour out anything that's got you frustrated or otherwise. And you can always get in touch in the show notes if you want to do that. But this episode I look back on and go, okay, that was a day where it wouldn't come together. You were frustrated for 3 hours. You started over and over again, but you still got an episode out. You still did the rep, and that's the formula that's worked out and produced success for you in other areas of life. And it'll be special. And so hopefully in next week or in the preceding weeks, I can get that big three conversation out for you. If not, I'll talk about other relevant topics that are going on in my life. But if you've pulled teeth with me through this conversation, thank you so much. And if you're not following or subscribing on the platform you're tuning in on, please do that. There's a back catalogue. Go back, listen to some of the more polished and deliberate episodes, not the ones recorded on the fly. I think there's some good ones in there. You can let me know which topics you love listening to. We can focus more on them. But thank you for getting through this one with me. I'll be back next week, barring any major events occurring, to keep the reps going with another episode of the Marketing Business Wealth Podcast.